Choosing a good base location in any survival game is important, and this is no different in Grounded. In this video, I'm going to show you my favorite places to build a base in Grounded, including prime locations for starter bases. When scouting for base locations, the main things I consider are proximity to important resources. Basically, how close are you to the important resources you're going to need at that point in the game? Food and liquid sources. Of course, you have to manage your hunger and thirst in Grounded just like every other survival game, so you want to make sure you build your base in a place that provides you with an ample food source as a liquid source. Safety. Basically, how safe is the area you're building in? Are there any dangerous creatures that you might not want to deal with or might not be able to deal with that patrol the area? Also, is it going to be a good place to build a base in case you get a faction raid against your base so that you can defend yourself without taking too much damage? Building resources nearby. Basically, are there building resources or the type of building resource you want to use for your base close by so you don't have to travel long distances or set up zip lines just to transport the resources back and forth, which will then just make the building process take much longer? First up, what I want to do is take a look at two places that I like building starter bases. So first off, we are here at the spawn area. So this is where we're going to spawn if you start a new game right here in the middle of the map. And what I want to do is show you the first place that you're going to come across. That's a very good place to build a starter base. It is right outside the spawn, and it's this baseball here. The reason this is a good spot to build is that it is centrally located for the early part of the game. It is also very safe because it is up high here, and no creatures that I've seen have been able to get up on top of here. Even the ones that jump, that may be possible, but I just haven't seen it happen. Also, there's no aggressive flying creatures around here, so you shouldn't have to be worrying about them getting up there. If you do somehow trigger a faction raid, this will be super easy to defend because the enemies will not be able to get up here, unless, of course, they're the flying enemies. Now, it also has resources nearby, so there's sap here, there's mushrooms, all the early game resources are nearby, or there's other sources for them. And what I end up doing normally is I just threw this house together real quick. You can build a house up here if you want to. Normally what I end up doing is just taking the stuff that's in here, the roasting spit, the lean-to, and the workbench, and maybe like a storage basket, and then just placing them on top of the baseball here without even building a house, because this is really just a good place for a starter house. Downsides to building up here, there's only a couple. One's going to be it's fairly small, and also there is a wolf spider that occasionally patrols around here, maybe two, that patrol around this area, so you do need to be careful of that. It's not normal, like you're not going to see it every single day, but it does happen from time to time. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at another place that's very close by. That is a place that I really like building my starter base. In fact, it's the one that I normally choose. So we're approaching the Mysterious Machine. This is going to be one of the first important points of interest you're going to be sent to in the game. Very early on, it's going to send you here. So as you can see, we're very close to the actual baseball over here. And this is actually the spot where I prefer to build my early game bases. Now, this base looks a little tiny because I just threw it together real quick. As you can see, it doesn't really have much in it. But this rock gives you a lot more surface to build on than the baseball. So it's larger than the baseball in terms of being able to build on it. And then also it is all close to the early game resources. So you're going to notice there's sap here, there's clovers, there's sprigs, there's plant fiber, everything like that. It's centrally located. Another great thing that later on you'll notice if you're near the Mysterious Machine is this is a really good spot for collecting crow feathers, which the crow will drop because the crow tends to fly over this area quite frequently when going from point to point, and you'll end up getting lots of crow feathers just passively by being in this area. And then the downsides of this area are going to be, from my experience, having any type of food up on this rock, whether it's a roasting spit or if it's in baskets or something like that, you're going to end up attracting lots of ants, red ants specifically, the worker ants. Now, it can get annoying because there's lots of them, and what they do is they end up crowding around this rock. That could also be a good way of farming them if that's what you want to do without having to go to the red ant hill or seeking them out. But it can get a little bit of annoying. It's also not as safe as the baseball because, as you can see, we are much closer to the ground. So any type of spider or creature that can jump is pretty easily going to be able to get up on this rock if it wants to. And then also, like the baseball, there are wolf spiders that patrol around here. And those are the two places I like to build starter bases. Let's head on over to some places that I would recommend building your first full out base. Next up, I want to show you a place that I know a lot of people build on. I don't personally usually build here because I just don't like this area. This is going to be the flat rock that's up here on the western side of the pond. So here's the pond right here, and we're just south of it. And you'll notice that this area has a very large flat surface to build on. And that's really cool if you want to build a giant base. The only reason I don't normally build over here is because it is surrounded by aggressive creatures. There are orb weavers, orb weaver juniors, and bombardier beetles pretty much everywhere. The wolf spiders, I think, can patrol over here occasionally. There's also a stink bug over there, as you can see. So you're basically surrounded by aggressive creatures. If you can deal with that, this is a decent place to build. And while we're over here is going to be another spot that I'm going to mention. This is also a spot that I don't normally build on, but I do see lots of people building on, and that's going to be this wooden fence here. So this wooden fence goes all the way around the southern part of the koi pond. The reason people like building up on there is because it's up high and it's safe. The reason I don't like building on there is because it is just surrounded by orb weavers. There are orb weavers everywhere. There's also stink bugs nearby. There's orb weaver juniors. So generally, I don't like building up here. If you want to build like a long, narrow base, it's a good place. It can be a good place to build. Now, as we head to the third place that I enjoy building, and actually it's one of the places that I would recommend building a base early on. I did want to point out that I'm passing by the wooden fence over here. So as you can see, there's a gap by the tree, but there is also the wooden fence over here. So this is the other part of the fence. Again, like I said, you can build up there. It's fairly safe to be up there, but on both sides of the fence, you're going to be finding aggressive creatures. So what we're doing is we're heading over here to the pond. And again, while we're passing by here, I used to build by this juice box all the time. I do not build by the juice box all the time anymore because the wolf spiders now patrol all the way down by here. Sometimes you can also aggro the orb weavers and the orb weaver juniors. But what we're going to do is head down here into the koi pond over here on the lily pads. Now, you can actually build on the lily pads. This base that I built over here is actually built on the buoyant foundations, which will unlock later on in the game. You don't have to do that. You can actually build off the lily pads if that's what you want to do. You'll notice this is a very large area. It is super safe. Basically, there's no land-based creature is going to get over here unless you aggro a spider and it just hops across the lily pads after you. That very rarely happens. If you do end up having a wolf spider chasing you, just don't go on a lily pad, jump in the water and swim, and it should leave you alone. So aside from being very safe, you can see there's a massive area to build. You can obviously build the buoyant foundations across as much of the pond as you want. If you want to build on the lily pads, there's ample space here for you to build, as well as connect between the different lily pads. There's also lots of food resources. So if you're able to farm the tadpoles that are down here, there's water fleas, there's well, not the water boatmen. You can't eat those, but you can eat the water fleas and the tadpoles. They are everywhere. You can cook them and also make jerky out of them. So you're going to have tons of food sources. The two reasons you might not want to build over here is this area is just not that close to the most early game resources. You can build a bunch of sap catchers over here on the oak tree, although you do have to be mindful of the aggressive creatures that do roam over there. And also, you have to be mindful of Trudy, who is the giant koi fish that's down here. You do end up jumping in by accident and running into Trudy. You will get one shot if she hits you or just basically just runs into you. And then while we're over here, here's one other place I wanted to mention. Again, this is not a place that I normally build because it's just really isolated. It's even further away than lily pads are. Is going to be the pagoda over here. Now, the reason people build over here is because as of right now, this is like a super safe place to build. There are no creatures that can reach over here. One thing I didn't mention with the lily pad base is basically if you get a faction raid, I think it's fairly unlikely, depending on where you build on the pond over there, that you'll actually get a faction raid. You can see over here, there's no land-based creatures getting to this during a raid. So basically, if you build on here, you're just not going to get attacked. You also have a field station right here, which is pretty cool, so you can just analyze stuff. The final spot in the grasslands that I like building a base, this is one of my favorite spots, is going to be Aphid Island. This is over here by the Rash Battletoad that you can see right there. And the reason it's called Aphid Island, or at least the reason I call it that, is because there are aphids everywhere over here. You can actually see aphid honeydew. You'll notice there's aphids just wandering around over here, along with the gnats and the weevils. The reason I like building here is because this is extremely safe. You are basically surrounded by water on all sides. So no land-based creatures are going to get over here. Even if they chase you, they're just not going to be able to make it. The only thing that happens is every once in a while, a mosquito might stray over here. But other than that single mosquito, which honestly, if you're weaving your way in and out of the grass here, is going to be much easier to deal with. And as you can see, there's aphids going up there. So this is a really, really, really safe place to build. It also has near infinite food. Besides the aphid honeydew, there are obviously aphids. There's gnats over here over the water all the time. There are weevils on here, so you can basically have unlimited roasts and jerky, and then you can actually fill up with the honeydew for your thirst a little bit. So that's just fantastic. It's also the safest place to keep a pet. When I had a pet in the game, this was the place that I kept it because, honestly, all three types of pets that are in the game right now, you can get over here. You can also keep them over here. You're not going to have any aggressive creatures coming over here, like I said, except for that one mosquito that occasionally comes over. And it's just going to be a safe place to keep it. You don't have to worry about it wandering away and dying or anything like that. It's also going to be very easy to keep it happy and stuff like that. And then the downsides are going to be over here are going to be the fact that you have to deal with the aphid, gnat, and weevil sounds. Now, I don't have the game sound on right now, but if you're over here and you're walking around, you're going to hear the gnats doing their little buzzing noise. The weevils are going to be making their little grunting sound, and the aphids are going to be doing their little chirping. That can get a little annoying after a while, but if you can handle that, it's definitely worth it. The only liquid source around here besides the aphid honeydew is going to be dew. Now, there's going to be a decent amount of dew here in the mornings and then in the evenings, but there's no like soda cans or juice boxes or anything like that. So you'll probably have to set up a dew collector at some point. And then last but not least, there's limited resources. So you do have the clovers over here and then some mushrooms, but there's not really much building resources over here unless you want to build out of grass. I typically, when I build a house here, build it out of weed stems. So you're going to have to transport weed stems over here. There are a couple weeds on here, but if you wait for those to respawn, it's going to take quite a while. So, and there's also just nowhere to get sap or any other resources like that outside the green ones here, like the plant fiber and the sprigs like that. So those are the downsides, but this is probably one of my favorite places to build early on. And the next place we're going to visit is very close by. That's going to be over here in the hedge. So we are in the hedge. The hedge, of course, is in the bottom right corner. You can see it's fairly large. It goes from here all the way up in this L shape. But the place I like to build in the hedge is the part here by the green paper clip. The reason for this is the safest part of the hedge, in my opinion. You are not going to have to deal with any spiderlings up here. At least as of I'm recording this, maybe something changes in the future, but you have a field station right nearby. You're up high, so nothing's going to be able to get up to you up here. There's no flying creatures around here. There are dangerous creatures that do wander around. We'll talk about those in a second, but you can essentially, if you connect around here, build a giant tree house, which is pretty cool. It also has tons of areas for setting up sap. Obviously, you can put sap catchers all around here, all over the roots, so you can just set up tons of sap. It's going to be the best place to get berries in the game because there's berries all throughout here, which respawn pretty quickly after getting there. You're going to definitely need berries as you progress through the game. The downsides, however, are going to be the fact that it has very few food sources. You might see a stray weevil or aphid wandering through here, as we can see one down there, but there's not many other things than that. And then there is human food that spawns over there, but that spawns like every couple of days. So once you get that, it's also not going to give you that much food from it. And you're going to have to deal with some dangerous enemies over there. So speaking of the dangerous enemies, there's nothing that normally you can see here larvae sometimes patrol under here. Once in a while, a wolf spider patrols over here, but if you're up top, they can't get to you. However, you need to be mindful if you build up here that you are surrounded by dangerous creatures that are pretty nearby. The corner down here by the deck where this plug is, that's a huge larva spawn. There's bombardier beetles over by this rock that's over here, that's right here. And then there's also tons of mites. They're not that big of a deal. Mosquitoes are up here. There's tons of spiders over here. And there's also wolf spider spawns nearby. So those are close by. But if I build in the hedge, I like to build here. A good thing for building up here would be basically like a berry factory. You could just put a bunch of jerky racks and dry the berries and just get tons of berries. And then the other downside is going to be that there's very few resources around here other than the sap and the berries. So for me, I don't normally build like a main base here. What I normally do is just build like a little outpost where I can get tons of sap and I can also get tons of berries. Next up is going to be underneath the picnic table. This is a place that on my main survival world, I built a giant castle. And this is a fairly safe area to build. So if you're not familiar, it's the left side of the map here. So we're the western side of the map. This square that's over here is the actual picnic table, which is right here, as you can see. I prefer to build underneath of it for a few reasons. One, right here where you build, if I build on this rock or if I build right over here over this water, it is super safe. The only thing that's going to be nearby is I think there's some ore weavers up there by the fence. There is a stink bug over there. The bees are up top, so they're not normally going to come down here and bother you, although they do sometimes sleep in the grass way down over there. And then later on, there is an in-game event that can trigger some infected enemies to be over here, but by default, they're not over there. And even if they do spawn, even if they do come later on, they're always way down there, so they don't normally come up here. This area has tons of building resources. There are weed stems over there. You can probably see. We'll take a look through our little peeper. There are weed stems galore over there. There's also mushrooms close by. There's toadstools, mushrooms all over this area, which just makes it super easy to build down here if you want to build out of weed stems or mushrooms. It also has a decent amount of food. There are mushrooms that spawn underneath most of these mushrooms, which should last you for most of a day. There's also some aphids and weevils that wander under here. The downsides are going to be there is a very little liquid down here other than the dew. There is a juice box, or was there a soda can that's back here somewhere that will have some soda in it sometimes. I believe it's back here against the fence. But other than that, you're going to have dew. Of course, you'll probably set up dew collectors, so I'm not normally worried about liquid by the time you're building over here. All right, I made my way on top of the picnic table, and I did want to mention before I zipline over to the sandbox that a lot of people do like building up on top of the picnic table here. It is relatively safe. However, these ants here can sometimes bother you. If you end up hitting one of them, they're all going to attack you. They're normally not going to bother you, but there are lots of bees up here, specifically over on this side. And that's why I don't normally build up here, because it's also an inconvenient place to get to. It's so high up, and there's not like an easy, super fast way to get up here. It would be a good spot to maybe put some zip lines, but if you get near these bees in survival, I'm in creative right now, but if you get near these bees in survival, they'll just start aggroing you and it can just become a pain in the butt. So I don't build up here. Some people do, but I just don't recommend it. So let's head on down to the sandbox. I'm going to show you my favorite place to build in the sandbox. I will say, as we're ziplining over here, that I don't normally set up a main base in the sandbox. It's just not worth it to me. What I do is I set up a little outpost over here. When I'm coming over here, I have somewhere to stop. The reason for that is going to be that the sandbox is super dangerous. So again, I'm in creative mode, so it's not going to show up. But if you're walking through here, you're going to get the sizzling effect if you don't take the right precautions, which means once the sizzle goes all the way up, your health's going to start draining rapidly. So you have to deal with that during the daytime. It's also super dangerous. You're not going to see it because I'm in creative mode here, but there are antlions everywhere that just pop out of the ground. There's also a wolf spider. So it's just it's not a safe place to build there. You can see the antlions down here, but the antlions also do pop out of the ground. And what I end up doing is I end up building back here on this little oasis. The reason I built back on this little oasis is going to be because it is, in my opinion, the safest spot. As you can see, there's a wandering antlion. Also, be careful that the cacti here will end up, if you run into them, they will damage you, although not as much as they did before. I build back here. If I build a little base here, this is, of course, back here in the bottom right corner. The reason I do this is it is, in my opinion, the safest spot to build inside the sandbox. It is going to be back. Nothing's, from what I've seen, I've never seen a antlion spawn back here. People have said that they've seen the wolf spider come back here, but I've never seen the wolf spider personally go back in here. I mean, I guess if it chases you. From fighting antlions, if you end up running across the water here, the antlions will not normally lunge across, so you can end up just kind of cheesing them. It's also right next to the field station. It's just a good spot to put like a nice little house here, or a little outpost like I'm showing here, where you just have like a place to sleep. You have your workbench. You can set up a roasting spit like I have down here. And then, of course, you're going to need a dew collector, because the other reason I don't like building in the sandbox is you get thirsty really quickly, and there's almost no water sources. So outside of the juice box over here, there's no water sources over here. So setting up a dew collector is an absolute must. Now, I will say a couple other places that I've seen people build over here that I also don't normally build on are going to be the sandcastle. The sandcastle, of course, looks pretty cool, but building over there, the reason that's going to be dangerous is you're going to have, I think there's like 3 or 4 antlion spawns around there. There's also antlions that spawn around like the perimeter here a little bit. It's not easy to get to. And if you're going to have to build like up in the middle here, because if you build along the edges there, you're just going to end up running into an antlion. They're going to have the antlion spawning in every couple of days, and it's just not the best place to build. Now, I will say one downside to building in that oasis is unless you build a stairway or a ladder to get out, you are going to have to make a fairly decent trek over there. Not too bad, but you are going to have to run your way out of there, which means you're going to have to run past the wolf spider and a bunch of antlions. And then the other place I've seen people build over here, normally it's going to be underneath one of these buckets. So I've seen people build like cool little houses underneath of here. The reason I wouldn't do that is it's kind of like very limited space under there, but you could sneak a little one in there, as well as that green bucket up there where you can build inside of it a little bit. But again, the sandbox is just not the best place to build. Next up is going to be a great place to build in the upper backyard. This is going to be on the retaining wall. The retaining wall runs the entire length of the yard. So as you can see, it starts over here on the left. It runs over to here. It does actually run all the way across here. So if you want to build somewhere more in the center, you can certainly do that. I just chose this area because it is very large, super flat, and there's usually not any enemies over here, at least from not what I've seen. I don't even think they can get up here, to be honest. And this is an awesome place to build. It's super safe. You are going to have some dangerous enemies nearby, but if you know where they are by the time you get up here, this is a super safe place to build. It also, like I said, is a huge area to build. It's a great location for a zipline hub if you want to just zipline back and forth to places, because it's so high up above the rest of the yard by default that building, you won't have to build up much higher in order to get to other places. And there's also lots to do in the morning, and the only downsides are going to be there's limited food sources. There are some mushrooms up here, but other than that, there's not many food sources. So you're going to have to seek out some food sources. And then the biggest drawback is honestly going to be that there's nowhere to set up a sap farm, because there's just nowhere right now, right up here by this area, to be able to set up a sap farm. Now, the reason I built here before and that wasn't a problem is because there was a glitch where you could attach sap catchers to turrets. So what I ended up doing was just building a bunch of sap catchers on turrets out on the retaining wall here and doing that. So outside of not being able to get a ton of sap, there is some sap nearby. It is a fantastic place to build. So those are the places I recommend building. Of course, there's tons of places you can build. It's really up to you. Those are the places I like building and the reasons why I like building there. If you like this video, here's a video you might enjoy where I share 15 of the most common mistakes that new players make in Grounded.